Hi, my name is Matt Archambault. I'd like to welcome you to my third DVD, which is titled How to Draw the Hand and Foot a Layered Approach. For those of you who haven't watched any of my previous DVDs, I've been an illustrator since roughly 1990, and I've also been teaching at the School of Visual Arts since 1997. How I've decided to work this DVD is I've decided to divide it into two different parts. The first part is going to be all about how to draw the foot in my layered approach, which would be the planes, the angles, light and shade, and some anatomy. And then I'm going to repeat that process with the hand. So stick with me through the anatomy part and you'll be up and running in no time. So let's get started with the first technique. All right, our first chapter in the foot section of this DVD, I want to talk about some strategic landmarks of bones that I think are very helpful to understand. Now, as I explained in the introduction, this DVD is not about anatomy. It's just, there's way too much anatomy to understand, and I'm not going to be able to fit it in a 2-hour DVD. And remember, I want to give you what is going to make your drawings improve immediately. So understanding every single bone and muscle is not going to do that, but understanding a few strategic ones will. All right, so what you want to understand first is this fibula that comes from the outside of the knee to the outside of the ankle. And the outside of the ankle here is going to be like a little bit lower than the tibia, which is going to be a little bit higher. This ankle, we're just going to call it an ankle because that's just a common word for it. But it is the tibia that comes down. And if you just remember the inside is higher than the outside, that's something that's going to help your drawings. And then with the metatarsals over here, you just want to know where they're going to be like really on the edge of the foot. And they're going to give you a wonderful opportunity to wrap some lines in and around, some nice convex lines. That's how when I'm thinking about the bones, it's primarily on the top of the foot. That's where you really see them. That's where the skin is going to be like a little bit thinner. Underneath the foot, you know, there's a lot more muscle and there's a lot more fat padding underneath the foot. So just understanding that these metatarsals are going to give you an opportunity to wrap in. Now, if we zoom on down to this foot down here, this is your end game, okay? But all these like lines that you put down on the paper, or that I'm putting down on the paper, the lines are the strategic like locations that I've talked about, like right over here with the tibia, the inside ankle. You know, so that's where I'm rolling a convex line in. And then I got like a couple of like little lines over here that are indicating the heel bone. Like these lines are on the plane shift from the back of the heel to the side of the heel. Okay, so that's like really important. That's what I mean about strategic locations. You know, this like little bump over here is also part of like your heel bone, and it's just going to make that skin, the contour of that skin, protrude out. Same thing, these lines that wrap around this cuneiform over here, strategic bone locations. I think it's important that maybe you go out and you buy an anatomy book and every once in a while look at it. I'm not saying that you need to know every single bone. It does help. I will say, if you're trying to do a realistic type figure drawing, the bones and the muscles and your understanding of where they're located in the body is going to help you, but it's not the most important thing, because all the techniques that we're going to dive into next after I talk about the muscles will really be able to get you to draw the foot and the hand in a very competent way. But I just want to show you at home where I use these strategic locations on this end game foot down here to kind of like wrap around, like this flange over here where this metatarsal meets the flange. Like I'm wrapping around, and that's going to be a good place to show the viewer, you know, what is underneath the skin. So your figure drawings and, you know, the hand and the foot do not look like they're made out of rubber. And same thing now, if we look at this like little drawing, you can see the flanges down here, how this is what I'm talking about on the top of the foot. You're really going to see the bone that would like wrap in. This would wrap into like a little fold. You know, this is going to like wrap in a little bit over here. This is really pushing down, like from this bone to the bottom of the contour of the foot, there'd be like a little fat pad down over here. And same thing over here, there'd be like you got to leave like a little space between the edge of the bone and the edge of the contour. Some of the bones are going to be like right on the edge, like I said, primarily on the top of the foot. Bottom of the foot, there's like that space, there's that like little cushion that your foot has. And then if we look at this foot over here, same type of thing, fibula on the outside of the ankle is really going to protrude out, is going to be lower than the inside of the ankle, and then this metatarsal, this outside, is really going to push out that foot. So like a couple of these strategic locations like I talk about, if you understand a few of them, boy, they're really going to go a long way for you. And you know, even over here, you're going to get like I'm going to talk about the gesture of the foot as we move on. This is going to give you like a nice area to promote this roundness of the foot, because I think a lot of people that draw the foot just make it so flat, and it's not flat. It's kind of like really round over here. So just understand minimal muscle and bone goes a long way for your drawings, okay? So I would say in your own time, go out and get a book on anatomy. We've talked about the bones, and now I want to talk about a couple of strategic muscles or tendons that I think that you should be aware of. These extensor tendons that are coming on down to each individual foot, each individual toe they're coming down towards. You know, if someone's like kind of lifting their foot up slightly, they're really gonna kind of be pronounced. Not major that you understand them, but I wanted to point them out because they kind of do show up on the top of the foot. This right over here, this Achilles tendon that coming back down your leg, the back of your leg attaching to your heel, I think that's one that you should be aware of. The Achilles tendon, everyone's kind of aware of it anyway. And then you're really going to be seeing these extensors on the top of the foot. Same thing over there. On the inside of like your lower leg is pretty much, you know, all bone anyway, with the exception of the back. So Achilles tendon and the extensors, and then you've got this other extensor over here that is going to kind of hold everything together, and this really gives your foot that round feel that we're going to talk about next on the gesture portion. And then if we move over here to the right, you know, your lower leg muscle, Achilles tendon, huge. And then you can see what I talked about already with the ankle, where the inside is going to be like a little bit higher than the outside. And you know, this is just really going to be something that you want to work on and roll into with that ankle. And then an abductor on the outside of that foot and an abductor on the inside is, you know, you want to be aware that that is there as well. So again, minimal anatomy goes a very long way. All right, so now let's move in and get into the guts of how you're actually going to draw the foot. The next chapter in the DVD is going to be about gesture, okay? And this is like really important. And basically what I talk about in the figure drawing DVD is this peanut shape, okay? And if you've taken my class, everyone who's taken my class understands how big I am into this peanut shape. And I say, you know, the torso is going to be the peanut. Here's my center line, here's my rib cage, here's my navel, here's my oblique, and here's the front of my pelvis. And everything originates from the peanut. So there are, you know, normal sized peanut shapes, and then there are really kind of skinny ones. And then you've also got like a peanut shape that would have, you know, like a box at the end. So you want to try to think of like contorting that shape. And so you really want to use it when you're drawing a foot. Okay, so now a quick little gesture for the foot would be, I'm going to roll in, I'm going to crunch in over here, I'm going to come back around to my heel, and this would be the ball of my foot right over here, this would be the arch of my foot, and then this would just be like my ankle area. Oh, I'm sorry, this would be my heel area, and now I'd have like my ankle over here that's going to roll up. And then you got to think about this very weird shape that I'm drawing you. This is going to be almost like one of those shoe tree things that you would put inside of your shoes, like when you store them, to kind of, so their shoe keeps its kind of shape. That's what you want to draw. So now this would just be like a tendon that rolls in, and then I'm going to kind of come around, and you know, this would just be, if the foot is going to be bent, this would be like my toes, this would be the top of my foot. But do you see how when I do that quick little gesture, this would be that tendon that we talked about that's going to hold everything together? Let's do another one. Let's do one from the front. So now, same type of thing, right from the front. Try to draw a shape of, say, like one of those shoe trees that you would put inside of your shoes to keep their shape. So now this is the top of my foot. And then we'd come to the bottom where my toes are, my big toe right over here, metatarsal kind of pushing out. So now I've got my ankle. and that's going to kind of like roll up, and then right in the back would be my heel. Okay, so that's what I mean about doing like a quick little gesture of the foot. And so this would be that bend once again. Sometimes I roll this in if it's like a figure drawing class, just to show the viewer that this thing is wrapping around, wrapping around, wrapping around. And just with like a quick few lines, I've got like that gesture of the foot. And again, it's almost like a gesture line when you're doing a figure drawing. One more here. So it's really the top of the foot. Come on down. Let's get the ball of the foot, and then this. We're going to do this extreme arch over here, and now we're going to get the back of the heel. I'm going to do that as like a little circle. So now that would be the gesture of a foot, like a more of a profile back view. So let me kind of give you a clue here where the ankle is. So this would be ankle bone, and then tendons, big toe. Maybe I'm going to show now a little bit of underplane. Okay, so you see how I'm like really loose and sketchy with this, and everything originated from that peanut shape. And I guess my crunch now, because the peanut shape, you don't want to do, let me just kind of move back over here for the camera to see. This would be that peanut shape with no convex line, with no crunch. I know I've said this a lot to you in my classes and on the DVD, figure drawing DVD, but you got to give me like a crunch in that rolls in, that shows the viewer that it's a three-dimensional form. So, you know, now my crunch on this foot would probably be like right over here. It'd be like a fold of skin, you know, maybe this ankle would come in a little bit too. So that's another example of like a foot where you're going to get it in really, really quick. So let's just do, I think, one more, and which I think is the hardest view, which is the front view. So it's going to be like a little bit more foreshortened. So once again, this pencil, I don't have the right feel for this pencil, but I'll get it. You know, the front of your foot where your toes are is going to be like much wider. So I'm going to get that in, extreme view, almost as if we're at that same eye level. Ankle, come on up, ankle over here. And so now this would be my big toe. So just to kind of give you an idea, and then that would be the grouping of like my lower toe. So do you see how I on each one of these, I've wrapped this line around the front of my ankle? We talked about the skeleton, the bones of the foot. We talked about the minimal muscles, and I also just talked about a gesture line. So now let me spend a little bit of time now. This chapter is about the angles, but I have to admit I'm not a purist anymore with the angles. So what I'm going to do quickly for you is I'm going to do a quick like little gesture. All right, so like what we talked about with the peanut shape, roll right on in to that ankle. Okay, so that would be my gesture of that foot. That's how I would kind of handle it in class. Now I know it's very light and you can probably barely see it, but I'm really a big fan of working light to dark, and I will try not to say that too many times on this DVD. Okay, so let's get this one in now with that shape that we talked about. Okay, so that would be my gesture. Very simple. Now, let's get into the angles. So now with the angles, it's going to be, come on down with these lines. And I don't like the way that I laid it down, so I'm going to kind of fix some stuff here. So it's this angle, this one, and now you just dance down. And you do not have to go as dark as how hard I'm pressing down on my pencil. I'm just doing this for you at home so the camera can really see it. So look at all those angles on that one side of the foot. And now let's come on down this way. Tibia is going to be higher. Okay, now let's get into the heel. Okay, now these angles coming down the inside. Metatarsal kind of pushing out in that flange as well. Okay, so now let's get in the front angle for all of those toes together. We can come on back after and get the individual toes. So let's say that's an angles drawing for that particular foot. So let's move on over now to this one, and let's get the heel. Let's get the bottom. And now let's get going into the ball of the foot, big toe, and now all of the toes together, little toes, and now let's just simplify this area. Two big angles for the top, so we're showing the viewer it's not flat. All right, so that is an angles drawing of these two individual feet. Now, I have to admit, like I said earlier, that I don't really use the angles in this fashion that much anymore. If I do, it's because I'm running into problems and I'm falling back on an old technique that has helped me out in the past. And when I do the angles, look how light I'm pressing down on my pencil here. I do it really lightly because I want to go over it with my organic line, and I want things to look a little bit more organic. So let's say you did press down this hard. You can still now do this continuous line. So we're going to have like a little convex that rolls in, and you can clean it up a little bit. So I'm going to have a convex line that rolls into one of those extensor tendons. All right. And now I've got a metatarsal that's bumping out on the side of my foot. This is what I was talking about earlier with the flanges, how they're really going to be pronounced on the outside of the skin. So now these toes, I can do them, since this chapter's on angles. You see how I got that big broad angle for all the toes first? Now what I'm doing is I'm coming in and I'm getting each individual toe, and I'm rolling in and I'm looking at this little negative space in between the big toe and that, let's just call it number 1 and number 2. So now I can come back and adjust with my angles. Now I'm going to go back to organic. This is where I would use one of those convex lines that's going to roll in. Okay, so that would roll in, show it that's a little bit three-dimensional. Okay, angles. Now let's just go back and clean up this foot, and let's say I'm going to come back, tendon, Achilles tendon, organic, and the more angles you put on the foot, the more complicated you make the edge, the better, I think, because I think you got to know when to go simplistic with the angles and when not to. So this would be like another convex line that we talked about. Convex meaning it rolls in. And so let's go back to the angles. Let's go back to the purest. So there's this toe, and now this little one, and then we have that flange that bumps up. We've got this little angle that rolls in, and we've got the little toe that is going to come on in, bumps up, comes in a little bit convex, and make it wrap. It's really a tendon and a vein combined. This angle, this angle, this angle. Come on into a tendon, and now the top of that bone. Okay, so now we've got another tendon, and then that foot. So you basically, the reason why I'm doing these two drawings for you is to show you the combination of the gesture that I did first, now combined with the angles, so you make your foot look a little bit more complicated on the contour, and this line that's going to wrap around that tendon that holds all the extensor tendons together, and it's just going to show that the foot is round, and I do that on every drawing. Now, I do it a lot on my short drawings. On a big drawing, you want to break the line. Not on a big drawing, on a long, more finished drawing, you want to break the line. So if you have this line really hard edge wrapping around, it's going to cut your foot off of your ankle, and you don't want to do that, but you want to just indicate it lightly. Let me just try to do like one more for you. One more profile. So maybe I'll come down like right over here. So now let's go with the gesture. So push this little arch out of the top of the foot. Very light gesture, ball of the foot. And now let's come around with the arch right into the ankle. Okay, good. So that's my gesture. All right, I did it very quickly. I know that it's very hard to get the contour and a gesture happening at the same time. So now let's go into the angles and let's be a purist. And again, I'm not into this that much anymore, but I think angles is the most overrated technique, and most of the students that I have in my class, I have to say, do not like to do the angles, because it's just, you know, it's not something that's going to give you like immediate results. It's just going back to the title of the DVD, a layered approach. It's just one layer. And you have to understand that you got to master the angles layer for everything else to come together. So this angle, I'm going back to that organic line. Right over here, get this big angle going into my heel, make this turn. This is a little straighter, the back of the heel bone. Okay, perfect. Angles drawn. Now let's separate each toe, perhaps. So it's really helpful to get the outside contour and then you would separate. So I'd get that big toe now, and now maybe I'd do the separation of the little toe. And now if you have some knowledge of the flanges, you'll get the angles of each individual flange going on over there. Okay, so let's move on. Angles, make them look complicated. Before we move on, I want to show you what not to do, and I'm going to do it right over here. And I did this with my portrait drawing DVD. I showed you at home what not to do, how to draw eyes. This is how you so do not want to draw a foot. Okay, and it's a funny drawing. This is concave. Okay, everything here is very concave. Never do this on the top of the foot, ever. That's going to really show your foot being extremely primitive. So the better way to handle this kind of, I always call it a half pipe, is to do the angles, okay? Is to do the angles and bow this arch out of the top of the foot and to understand the underlying gesture like I talked about, which is going to be that peanut shape, how this is going to roll around, arch of the foot, and then your peanut shape over here. This immediately eliminates the concave that I showed you over here. And then combined with the knowledge of that the inside ankle is going to be higher than the outside, and you're going to wrap that around. That's a great combination to get a quick foot down in a hurry. All right, let's move on to the next drawing. Planes are probably going to make me draw not too good here. It's going to be more mechanical. But first, let's lay it in. Let's lay it in with the angles. Okay, and then I always love to use the angles for all the toes / fingers combined when we get to the hands as well. I'm going to talk about that big time. And so now our angles are going to kind of zoom on up the foot. Okay, so that would be my very quick gesture / angles drawing. So now I'm going to think about the planes. And now this lower leg, this would be my front plane and that would be my side plane. And this is going to come on down. So now, and this extensor, believe it or not, is the plane shift, one of the extensors. And that's going to come right into my little toe. Now, this would be my convex line. That's going to roll into my ankle, just so I can show you a little bit more of this foot. We won't have it be a pure, totally primitive planes drawn. So now here's my ankle. That's my line that wraps around that I talk about over and over, that you should have in most of your drawings when you're drawing the foot. And now let's come on back down here and round some of these edges. And I'm going to try to really be a purist now with the angles of the toes. So the big thing that you want to try to remember, not so much on this foot that I'm drawing right now, is the front plane of the toes. And the front plane of the toes, I'm drawing it all together as like one big shape, is going to be really skinny. And I think it's very important that you get the front plane of the toes in. And then this big toe over here, I'm going to just make this in shadow. That is the front plane because that toe pretty much is a cylinder. So this big toe is a cylinder. It's a cylinder and a box at the same time. I know it's hard for me to explain that. So from here, what are these lines that I'm doing right now? This is the side plane of the foot. That is the top plane. The side plane is catching shadow. The top plane is catching light. So now if I take each individual toe or flange, you are going to think of top plane, front plane, side plane. Now let's get this little guy in. Top plane, front plane, side plane. So I should shade it. I think it'll help you see it a little bit more. And it's partially cylindrical as well. Let me just separate these two. And when I'm separating the two toes, I am totally using angles. All right, so let me get this in, and let me get the angle. And there's overlap as well. So this is where the flange is really what I talked about, where you're really going to use those convexes, but this is a chapter on planes, so I don't want to talk about the convex too much. That's not necessary. So let me get in the side plane, and then I'm going to just shade it for you, and I think it'll make like a little bit more sense. So now we're going to shade this little toe a little bit more solid. Side of that cylinder, side of the plane of that other toe right there. Side plane, front plane, and now side plane, front plane, and now side plane. Okay, so you can treat, I should press down harder for you, I will at the very end. You can treat each individual toe as a box slash cylinder combined. And then if you just think that this thing's going to come down like a little bit more triangular, and now if I can just be like a little bit more solid for you at home, you'll really start to see the foot in more of like a box-like shape. Okay, now technically it's a box, but it's also cylindrical as well. I think it's important that you do both at the same time. Now let's get into just a profile foot. All right, so let's come on down now. Let's get in the angles. And let's get in the front angle of that toe, and then we're going to wrap up. And let's come on up this way. And let's get in the ankle. Heel. Okay, so those are my angles. Now let's do some planes. So this would be the back plane of that foot. And then it has a little bit of a top plane showing as well. Okay, so now I'm just going to do the side plane of that individual foot as a middle tone. So this would be like my dark. So you got to try to think of, like, especially the heel, the back of it is really going to be this. I'm going to make this like a little bit skinnier for you at home. Then my side plane, and then this toe. So top plane, side plane. And I won't get into each individual toe again for you over there. What I will do is I'm going to add some drawings on the end of this DVD as a slideshow for you, so you can kind of look at some of these very primitive type drawings. These toes, as they go back, you're really not seeing the side plane of each one of those toes because there's overlap, and this toe right over here is overlapping the side plane of that toe. So you just got to show that with that line, and that line is going to be each phalanx, each flange. So just top plane, side plane, back plane, top plane, side plane, front plane of the toes, and then it's a combination of boxes and cylinders. Let's do one more planes drawing. Again, some of this stuff, you have to understand it inside of your head. However, you want to draw in your own style. Now, with me, I was like a maniac, and I used to want to understand each technique. And for years, I would draw each technique to its completion. And then it wasn't until maybe a few years ago that all that stuff just became so ingrained in my head that it became put into my subconscious, and I just drew like in a more organic, looser way. However, I think it's imperative that you do some of these planes drawings for yourself, just because they're really important. They're really going to add to your drawings and make them look a little bit more dynamic. Once you got to try them first physically, is what I'm trying to say, before you can master them mentally. Now let's get into this foot right over here. So now let's get into the big picture, and the big picture is this would be, let's see, top plane. Okay, then the first set of flanges are going to be a top plane, front plane of the metatarsals. Now let's get in a front plane of the last 2 digits, we're going to call them, of the flanges. And now let's go to the big toe. And this big toe, let's just do something different. Now we can treat it as a box. This would be the box, but it's also a cylinder. So you got to think both at the same time. I know that could be like a little frustrating, and I'm not giving you a definitive answer as to is it a box or is it a cylinder. It's both, and you got to be able to see it both ways, the ball of the foot too. So now you see how I drew this line over here, and you see how I'm treating that more in like a box-like manner. However, it's kind of also round. You definitely want to be able to see both. You want to see this as a round entity, and you want to see it as a box-like form as well. So now let's just go in over here and get in the front plane of that. All right, so that's kind of cool. Now let's add like a little light and shade. So now the front, if the light's coming from the side and the top, front plane of these toes is going to be in shadow. Partially in shadow is the front plane of that toe, and this toe is cast in a shadow. This extensor tendon is actually the part from the tendon over. Let me move it over to the right. I'm sorry, to the left. From the tendon over, that's where the plane shift really is happening. So now I can just find the line that separates the light from the dark and just shade that over. And now the separation of each toe is going to be that shadow shape. And that's kind of how I'm thinking about with the planes. And now if I wanted to, I can come on in now with the angles organically and separate each individual toe after I've done the big angles line for all of them put together. Okay, so now that's another example. This, if I wanted to, I can press down a little bit harder for you at home, but I think you get it. I think you understand where I'm going. It's just all about plane shifts. Okay, what I'm going to try to do for you in this chapter is just try to do like a 10 to 15 minute drawing of one foot and just show you how I layer all the techniques on top of each other. All right, so let's just dive into it now. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a very light gesture line of the contour of the foot. And I'm not going to press down hard on my pencil, and when I'm doing this, I'm thinking about all the things that we've already talked about, but I'm drawing in my own style. Okay, so I'm measuring, thinking about some bones, I'm thinking about some muscles. Primarily what I'm thinking about, honestly, is the angles. And I'm thinking about that a lot, but I'm not drawing the angles because I just don't want to draw them. They're going to just be too primitive for me. So now I'm going to press down a little bit harder now, and I'm going to really pay attention to the edge. So this is going to roll into a tendon. Okay, so yeah, this is going to get really light because the front plane of this foot is totally in light. So I'm going to come back. This would be tendon / bone. So that's going to bow up, like we talked about in the previous chapters, how this has like that bow to it. All right, so now we come on down to this, where that metatarsal meets that phalanx, and we're going to zoom down. And then this tendon is going to roll in. It's going to be nice and light to the top plane of that phalanx, and then we're going to zoom on down. So I'm thinking bone, and I'm thinking angles, and I'm thinking convex line all at the same time. So now I've got another phalanx, and you can see my initial lines that I put down. I'm just about going on top of them, right to the tip of that toe, and then this could come down just a little bit more, and now I've got this other tip of that toe. So it almost looks like an angles drawing, but I'm drawing, a little bit more organically. So now I'm going to just stick with the contour and get in this kind of fat pad that is surrounding the phalanx inside of that toe. And then, this is all convex. I'm not doing too many convexes yet. I just really want to get in the contour which is hard. It's a hard way to draw this way, but for some reason I've been drawing good. And when you're drawing good, and when your drawings are on and you feel comfortable, you pretty much can always get the contour in this very simplistic way without struggling. And when you're struggling, you're not drawing too good. It's hard to do it with this limited amount of line and have it look good. All right, so that's my contour drawing of this foot. Really difficult. How did I get here? I thought about the bow, thought about angles. I am doing some minimal measuring, which I haven't talked about too much on this DVD. What's right across from that toe? What's right up above this? What is right across from that? And that helps a lot. So now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to draw in the line that separates the light from the dark. Okay, so now I'm going to come on down right into my tibia / ankle. Okay, then we kind of lose it a little bit over here. This could be a little bit higher actually. And then it's going to get like really soft and diffused, the line that separates. And then it's going to get a little bit more chiseled right over here. And this is side plane now of the foot. And so we've got where this flange meets that metatarsal right here. That's that little indent. This line that separates is wrapping around that phalanx, is what I meant to say. And then we've got the side plane of that like little toe over here. So now that's my line that separates the light from my dark. So I'm going to just take my pencil and I'm going to go with this very simplistic shading. I'm not going to press down hard with it because I don't want to go crazy with the tone just yet. But I'm going to give the viewer, you at home, an indication of the planes and an indication of where the light and shade is coming from. So now this would be like my side plane. So now I've got another plane, which is this tendon right over here. And that's going to be another very light, we're going to call it a turn-in plane. So it's going to be a little bit lighter, this turn-in plane. And let me make this side plane a little bit darker. So there's side plane, and then since this foot is round, what we talked about, this is where that tendon would be that holds the extensor tendons together. It wraps around, and you've even got some folds of his skin that wrap in that fashion, which I haven't gotten to yet. So we've got a tendon coming on down, and this one's going right into that big toe. And let's separate the toes now. So I'm going to come on in, and I'm going to pay attention to all the little angles. As I'm doing this toe, I'm looking at the whole foot. You know, you don't want to get tunnel vision, and you don't want to look just at the little minutia. You want to always look back at the whole big picture. So as soon as I get that line in, now it starts to look a little bit more like a foot, and that's going to be a cylinder. I'll put in that like little cylinder line right over there for you. Now I'm going to pay a bit more attention to the phalanx. Okay, phalanx over here, and then we're going to roll up. And now let's get in the little nail, and then we've got this phalanx. I don't like where it's positioned, but I'm going to try to stick with it so I don't change the whole drawing. It's actually not that bad. And then we're going to wrap up right into that tendon. You got to be careful. You got to keep that nice and light. And now we've got this little toe into that tendon, and then that far toe / metatarsal is really hard to see, but I'm just going to leave it like that for now. So now let's get in some really cool convexes, lines that roll in and up. So this is going to be a fold of skin, a little fold of skin over here, and that's going to add to the contour a little bit. You should see like a little bump over here, a little bump over here. I'll pay like a little bit more attention to my contour, make it a little bit more exciting looking, not so primitive. So we've got like another fold of skin that's going with the lay of the land and wrapping around. Okay, and then we've got this one wrapping around. Okay, this little bump over here is just like a little protrusion of the bone. And we've got a little fold of skin. So now I'm going to just not get stuck in one area of this foot. I'm going to move around. Press down a little bit harder so we get that 3-value system in. For those of you who've watched the portrait DVD and the figure drawing DVD, I've talked about the figure drawing DVD was really about all the different techniques. And I get into the techniques in depth. And then the portrait DVD, I don't get into the techniques as much but I do mention them. I don't physically demonstrate them, and I'm probably going to demonstrate them less and less on this DVD. I'm going to really just not devote each individual chapter to say the line that separates light from the dark. I'm going to kind of do it as I'm drawing here for you. So now we've got this like little tendon over here. So it's starting to come together now. Now I'm going to switch pencils, and let's get in some like little goody details here, or maybe not so goody. All these pencils are sharpened very funny. So you're going to excuse me for a moment while I just resharpen this. Okay, now let's get into this detail. So with this nail, I'm not going to outline, okay? I'm going to indicate with a very light line, and maybe I'm going to outline this edge. I want to draw slow with my pencil. It's not about drawing fast. Just take it nice and slow, and just don't feel the need to constantly lift your pencil off of the page. That's going to cause the chicken scratch. So go over the lines that you already have and drag your hand on the paper. This I'm not digging totally, but we're just going to kind of stick with it because it's a real minutia that I don't like. That's going to go up into that tendon. Now maybe you've got, you know, this nail. Could have done like a bit of a better job on it. And then a little line over here, fold of that skin. And when you do it, don't do it straight. Have it kind of wrap around the cylinder of that toe. So now let's get in this convex line of that phalanx, and now let's get in this nail with a convex. Okay, little indication now we want to go over the edge. Cool. And we can give a little side plane tone of that toe, and that's going to show the viewer that it's semi-boxy, semi-round, and yeah, it's subtle, but it's there nonetheless. And there's like a little dark accent over here where one toe touches the other, and that's going to kind of come in and just show me like a little bit of that round stuff. Now let's get in this other toe, which I've made a tad too big. Again, I can sit here and try to make it perfect for you, but I don't think that's going to make you draw better. It'll make me feel better that I got it perfect, but it's not going to make you draw better. So let me just go with what I have and not adjust too much. And this toe is butted right up against that one, so I'm really not seeing too much of a side plane, although I'm going to cheat and I'm going to indicate it a little bit. So this should come right up, wrap around, faint phantom lines. Phantom lines, they're there, but you can barely see them. I'm going to give myself like a little phantom line over there for that joint tendon over here, and this is like really light. It's all bathed in light. So now let me come in and try to make this like a little rounder, a couple of those round lines. You don't always want to do like tone. You want to give me also some of these directional lines on top of the tone. So I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, and so this, believe it or not, this little nail has a subtle front plane to it. And that's catching a little bit of light. So now I'm going to just pay a little bit more attention now to the base of the foot and get away from the toes. And I'm going to exaggerate this dark halftone and have some of this stuff roll up. I'll smudge that. Okay, so I could now come on in and pay more attention. So let's go back to the tibia, pay more attention, give myself like a little tonal shift with that. Sometimes I like to even draw the bone even though it's not showing up on the model or it's not necessarily showing up on the photo. Just actually physically draw it. And then this is too simplistic, this contour. So this is where if you have a little bit of knowledge of anatomy, you can exaggerate your drawings a little bit. So I know that heel bone's protruding out just a little bit. And so instead of just like one line that gradually goes in, so now I can make this foot a little bit more interesting with the way that it looks. And I'm going to show the viewer also here a little bit of underplane because this is rolling under. So I'm going to make it a little bit darker. This is going to be a little bit darker. So I'm going to come on in with this line, wrap around. I know it's very repetitive. This is an underplane to more tendons. This tendon actually attaches right to that metatarsal, and this one attaches to that metatarsal on the bottom. So it's just that little tonal shift. You're asking yourself in life drawing class, what is that? Well, that's just the underplane, because these tendons are cylinders. That's the underplane. So you give me that like little indication over there, and this would be the back plane of the Achilles tendon. So now let's just knock this down. Knock it down, meaning making it darker. Push this Achilles a little bit more. Okay, and now let's give that turning plane a bit more bite and make it a little bit darker. And this I'm going to make darker. I want to roll in a little bit more solid with the tone. The more solid the tone is, the more three-dimensional everything's going to look. Okay, so now I'm a little warmed up. Hopefully you can tell that I'm a little bit warmed up, because the first drawings I did, some of them were kind of rough. So now, since most of this is bathed in light, I can give, since I have some knowledge of what's going on underneath, I can give that little line for that extensor. Or I can give, you know, this little side plane of that extensor and make the front of this foot a little bit more interesting. Okay, let me just do this, and let's see, let me back away now. Let me lean away. And what else can I work on this drawing? I think I'm going to just push these side planes slightly, and then we're going to move on to one more. I think let's just push this, make this a little bit darker, and there's just all these like little doodads over here. Can't explain to you what they are. Folds of the skin. I'm going to push this round aspect just a little bit more. You want to do it without it being cutting the foot off of the lower leg. Alright, so let's move on to another drawing. I'm going to get a little bit of the lower legs in on this one. Let me start a little bit over to the... Okay, so lower leg, peanut shape, and when I draw the lower leg and the foot are so closely tied together, you just got to roll right into that ankle. And then immediately what I would do is I'd come around the ankle like that, and I'm not using any technique, I'm just drawing in my own way here, which is an organic way. Thinking about all the techniques in my mind, I'll go over them at the end. That's going to roll right into a tendon, and then we've got this to the metatarsal, right to the bottom of the foot. And then at this point now, I'm looking at the whole thing, I'm not getting too caught up. Here's my heel, and then I've got that one metatarsal that pops out into my small foot, and then for this I'm just going to do a gesture. Okay, so now I'm going to come on in here and just basically what I want to show you with this is that the top of this lower leg is going to be the top of my peanut. Okay, and where it rolls in is your tibia right over here. This is just going to kind of roll in, or it would roll in over here. So now I've got bone, metatarsal, and then let's just kind of tweak this a little bit more. Let's try to push this foot and make it a little bit more interesting looking. We've got that little phalanx into that little toe. So now this, I said I would normally do it with angles, so I'm going to do it organically. So you just got to, this is just like a little bit of measuring, and this toe is going to be like a little bit lower than that one. And then I've got like a really cool S-curve thing going on into this big toe. And this particular foot is partially upright. All the weight is on the other foot in this scene. So I'm getting this toe in right over here. So now you got to get, sometimes you got to get in that nail, just because it's going to help describe the form, because the nail wraps around the cylinder. And then there's that phalanx right over there, and you know, then we've got a nice S-curve. This is going to be a plane shift right over here, this line that I'm doing where the top of the foot meets the top of the toes. There's like a tone slash plane shift there at this simultaneously. And then I'm also going to get in this one tensed tendon that's rolling on up. For now, that's all I'm going to do with that. Let's see here. Let me just take a quick look at what I'm doing and just kind of tweak certain things here. There's a lot of convexes. gonna have this thing roll, and now I got that little bump, and then I'm just trying to pay a little bit more attention. So now let's move on to the next foot. So if I wanted to really draw these two in tandem together and make them look good together, I would look at the negative space in between both feet and which one is lower than the other. So what I'm doing now is I'm just kind of very quickly doing my very best to do a gesture, and then this is like lower than that foot. I'm doing a gesture line, I'm measuring at the same time, and let's get in this ankle, fibula, and that's going to roll up to a peanut as well, which I didn't do a great job of. So now let me come back in now and tweak this. So this is going to roll in slightly, then we've got tibia, and you can see a little bit of the side of that heel. Okay, now I gotta catch myself. Where am I? Okay, tendon, and where the metatarsal meets the phalanx, angles, and now I'm gonna go back to this gesture, simplistic line. Okay, we got the phalanx metatarsal right over here, and lots of stuff that rolls in. Remember I talked about that shoe tree type thing, which sounds funny, but if you think about that shoe tree that you store your shoes in, it actually, that shape is a very primitive gesture shape. So now let's get in this line that's going to wrap around. That's going to wrap around, and we got this tendon that comes in. That's my basic shape. So now I can come on in, and let's get some toes, and let's get in the top plane of that nail slash toe, and now let's get in, separate each little individual toe. So we've got this. Now let's get it. But you see how much easier it is when you don't draw each individual toe, you actually draw them on this line. They're not perfectly on this line, they're almost perfectly on this line, and right now almost is good enough. So we've got like a little side plane of that little toe, and we've got like a little side plane of that toe, number 4. Number 3, there's a little side plane, and 2, there's a little side plane, and that rolls in. That phalanx actually goes into the foot. There's like a little web in over here of like skin, and then we've got like a little side plane over here. So what I'm doing now is I'm drawing the line that separates light from the dark, and it's really faint. You can barely see it, but I'm going to put it in there anyway. And so if I want now, I can come around, wrap around, put in some tone, and maybe wrap around over here. This I want to make a little skinnier and really pay attention to the contour of that individual foot. So now this wraps into a phalanx. That's that convex line I told you about. And we've got another one over here, and I can pay a little bit more attention to the shape of that nail. All right, cool. These particular nails are painted red, so I'm matching the value, and that nail should not be dark like that. So let me just pay attention to the negative space, and I should wrap in not as darkly as what I just did right there. It's getting a little messy just because I'm drawing tiny, and I should have a sharper pencil, which I'm going to do that right now. Okay, and let's just keep moseying now with this. So let's get in this joint, we're going to call it, and that little nail, and we could wrap around slightly, widen these. You see how this foot gets wider at the tip of the foot, and then as we get to the ankle area, it gets a little bit skinnier and rounder. I mean, I would say that this view that I'm drawing you right now, this extreme front view, I think in the past when I didn't know how to draw feet yet, and I would do like this really cool figure drawing, and then it's like, oh my god, the figure drawing looks decent, and now I got to try to draw a foot, and I don't know how to draw this foot, and I don't want to ruin this drawing. And if I had this type of view where the foot looked like this, where it was kind of straight at me, foreshortened, that's when I would have like the biggest issues with drawing the foot. So if you can just get in an indication of this, what I'm doing right now, that very light sandal strap line, I call it in my class, it's going to really help with showing the viewer the dimension. And then, like I said, those key points that we talked about, key bone and muscle. So, I mean, yeah, there's like this little line over here is nice bone. And then we have some faint stuff with some of these tendons, and you can see like a round side plane of this phalanx where it touches a metatarsal. And so let me go back now and work on the other foot. So now the other foot is going to be, after I'm going to totally smudge that one. The other foot's going to be a little bit more complicated. And yeah, we're going to roll right into that. That line over here is actually the side of the metatarsal. And then, you know, this would be where the metatarsal meets that phalanx right over here. So it's pushing out. Okay, so we've got lots of convex lines happening. And I really want to kind of pick on that like little S-curve thingy that's happening, the separation of the little toe and the big toe. So now let's get in all the little individual joints. I'm going to represent that joint right there, the lower phalanx, and the upper one with that round circle. And sometimes by doing that little round circle, you're showing that joint right over there, and then a little rounder over there. I can lift this line up because that's a tonal shift. I'm going to erase that out. It's too low. And let me just come in now and separate. So I got to pay attention to what I've already put down. And let's get this in. Got a little negative space in between those, and the toes are getting wider. And again, the light's coming from the right, so I'm going to go a little shading on the left of each cylinder of the toe. And from this extensor to the left, then this foot's getting a little bit more in shadow. We got two bones right over here, beginning of the metatarsal, and then this thing is just going to be front plane, and I'm going to roll down. I'm going to put in that tone. And I think this is something that I showed you earlier. Sometimes you get like this like little line over here if that foot is bent. So I'm going to also little tonal shift, wrap around. This is a bit more complicated, so I'm going to get in this ankle, fibula, and it has a cast shadow, and it comes into the foot a little bit more. And this line that I'm showing you right now is not there, but you as the artist, you got to kind of faintly put it there. We're looking down at this foot a little bit more, so you got to think of like what I'm doing right now. Think that way with those cylinders, but not draw that way. And now let me just balance out the values. So this fibula is coming in front of the heel, so I'm going to make the heel a little bit lighter. Okay, convex, pay attention. And now maybe an accent where each toe touches the other. Just let's make this line a little bit darker. And then this front plane, even though I don't see too much tone, I'm going to cheat a little bit and put some just to break the planes. And then this is going to roll in over here. So, I mean, you see how organic, they're not the best feet I've ever drawn, but they are organic looking, and they are not, you know, that primitive type of thing where you just do like that concave line and not all these cool convexes. So now on each toe is going to have one of those extensor tendons on the top of the foot. So if you want to add a little bit more detail, I would stay away from doing the veins. You got to know what is a tendon and what is a vein. I think the veins, then you start to get into like too much. I mean, you can put it there. Basically what a vein is, it's a cylinder. And so you just got to think of where's the light coming from, and you would shade in the shadow part of the vein, and you would just like lay that on top of the foot. So let's see here. I'm going to step back from this. How am I digging this? The other thing that you want to remember, this tibia bone. It's always good to kind of get this thing in it really. I know this is not about muscles and bones, but I just want to, that just rolls right into that ankle. Same thing over here. The inside of like your lower leg is all bone, close to the ankle. So if you get that in, that's gonna be huge. And little cast shadow. I think in this DVD it's important that I give you as many views as possible. I don't know if it's that important that I sit and do like a 50-minute rendering of a foot. So yeah, that's a very tough call for me, because I know when I did the portrait DVD, I really talked about, I really did like a 50 long 50-minute long portrait, and I think that was like highly relevant. I don't know by me doing like a 50-minute long foot if that's going to be like relevant for you. All right, so let's start now. I'm starting with the leg. You can't talk about the foot without the lower leg. So I just got in, ankle area. So now I'm going to get in. I'm going to just try to slow down a little bit over here. This is that very skinny, thin tendon that wraps around all the extensors, and it wraps around the foot right over there. And then I'm going to get in the heel bone, and the heel bone slash Achilles tendon. Okay, so this is like, see how weird and abstract that shape looks right now? It looks very odd, but that's like a gesture, and I'm really focusing on, the contour being as organic as I can. Here's another muscle that comes down from your tibia, right attaching to your heel bone. It's very faint, it's just like a very subtle tonal shift, and then we've got this Achilles tendon that's attached to your heel bone, and it's right over here as well. So those are your gorgeous convexes. And now there's a little vein on the top of that bone, and we're looking at this angle, okay? And then we let's get in this shape. See what I'm doing right over here? This is to the ball of the foot. This is huge, if you have a view like this, a back view. So I got right to the ball of the foot. It's very abstract looking. This could be my peanut, and that could be the crunch right over there. Now I'm going to get in the toe. And everything, believe it or not, I don't like to oversimplify it too much for you at home, because I really got to teach all these different techniques, but everything is a peanut shape. So if I come back and I get in that big toe phalanx and then attaching to the metatarsal, that too is another peanut shape. So I'm not going to be late. So there's my foot. I mean, I got it in like 2 minutes, and that's with talking. So it's very, very thinking angles, thinking a lot of the peanut shapes, thinking about the major muscle and bones without memorizing all of the muscles and bones. That's so not necessary. It's important, and I think if you want to be a highly figurative artist and you're going to specialize in doing realism with the figure, I think it's really crucial that you know the surface layers of the muscles and most of the bones, because then your drawings are just going to go to the next level if you do that, but not super important. So you can see I got that in, and it looks decent. And I'm not talking about like the deep tissues and all that kind of stuff, information that is not going to make your drawings improve big time. So now let's try to make this more of like a line drawing. So now let's come on down here, press down a little bit harder with our pencil, and even though the photo is very light, I'm going to add some black line. Beautiful convex that rolls in to that Achilles, and now we've got, this is very light, but you got to know that it's there. That's my heel, and that's going to roll in. This right over here now is going to be fat tissue that protects and cushions your body as you're walking. And so this I'm really focusing on all the different angles, and then we roll in. There's folds of skin, and they're going to roll in. I'm going to make this a little bit thicker. We've got like a little side plane over here, and there's a plane shift, so I can come right on in and give myself a couple of those like strategic lines that show the viewer what I'm drawing, and that's a plane shift as well. So now from here to here, from here to the left, most of the foot's going to be in shadow. But let me see what else I can do here for you. So here's a beautiful tendon that's going right to the big toe. This little line that I'm doing, I'm pressing down a little bit harder than what I would like to, is your metatarsal attached to your phalanx, and then this is your phalanx attached to your second phalanx. So convex line, and now let's get in like a little indication of the nail. Okay, that's going really far away from the viewer, so I shouldn't go black with it. I should let it fade off with a lighter line. Let's get in the side plane right over there. And I really should get a sharp pencil right now, but I'm just going to see if I can push it with this pencil. Keep this momentum going. And then we've got lots of little doodads on this foot. They're really just folds in the skin that are wrapping around. And now each individual toe, get in that bump. That's going to be the phalanx. And let's get in this individual toe without overdoing the information. And like I said earlier, that's just like a vein sitting on top of bone. You got to know what a vein is, what a tendon is, and what a bone is. So now let's kind of bring this thing home. What have I done here? I've thought about angles. Okay. I've not so much measured so much because my measurements are not dead on. If they were, I would need to bring this ankle in. Something like that, because then when I pull a line straight down, this is over to the right a little bit more. I pull that line across and I look at that negative space. I pull that line across, I pull that line across, and I look at that negative space. I look at the negative space between here and here. So I'm doing all that fun stuff. Now, if I wanted to shade this, the light's coming from the back, so from here to the left is all shadow, and then this underplane is all shadow. This is the back plane, it's catching light. This is side plane, the side of the Achilles tendon, and then this is the side plane of the tibia. So I'm thinking planes, but I'm not drawing in a box-like way. I'm just doing it with a tone, but I understand where the planes are, and I understand all those gazillion plane shifts. And then this would be my convex line, and I'll press down a little bit harder now. Like this, just make this foot pop a little bit more. And yeah, I'm going to just add that third value just to give this drawing a little bit more punch. I'm going to give you one more drawing in this foot section.